Another day of fighting ends,
But the priests in the city are safe.
and the chariots still ride at sunset.
How did a small state in the Nile Valley become one of the greatest empires in human history? We tend to think of pyramids and temples, but Egypt's true greatness was forged in the smithies and on the battlefields. Behind the golden masks of the pharaohs lay strict discipline, advanced military technology, and engineering genius that was thousands of years ahead of its time.
As one. For Egypt.
Watch the video to the end to find out how Egyptian engineers created weapons that allowed them to dominate the region. What if I told you that the legendary Egyptian sword was not a sword in the usual sense? The Khopesh, which became a symbol of the pharaoh's power, is a unique hybrid, born at the intersection of an agricultural tool. Its curved shape, reminiscent of a sickle, was not a design choice, but the result of the complex evolution of Bronze Age weaponry. Initially, this shape was used for agricultural purposes, but armorers quickly realized its destructive potential in close combat. The blade was cast from bronze, which required incredible skill on the part of the metallurgists of the time, as the slightest error in the alloy would make the weapon brittle. The Khopesh did not simply chop, it allowed the fighter to control the distance and seize the enemy's weapon, thanks to its geometry. The outer curve of the blade was sharpened to razor sharpness, making it the perfect tool for delivering deep chopping blows. The inner part of the blade often remained blunt, allowing it to be used as a hook to pull back enemy shields. This weapon required not only physical strength from the warrior, but also a high level of skill, which took years to learn. Only elite units in the ruler's personal guard were honored with the privilege of carrying this heavy and expensive item. The bronze from which the Khopesh was made was a strategic resource in the ancient world, comparable in value to modern oil or rare metals. Egyptian expeditions traveled thousands of kilometers to obtain the copper and tin needed to create a durable alloy. The casting process was perfected. Craftsmen created blades that did not break when struck against hard objects. After casting, the blade was forged long and carefully to compact the metal structure and increase its hardness. Polishing completed the process, giving the weapon the golden sheen we see on museum exhibits. However, the Khopesh was not only an instrument of war, but also a powerful status symbol for the Egyptian elite. Pharaohs were depicted with this weapon in their hands on the walls of temples, demonstrating their readiness to punish the enemies of the state. Ceremonial versions of Khopesh were found in tombs, which were not sharpened, but were richly decorated with precious materials. Possession of such an item signified membership in the highest military class, among those who decided the fate of the empire. Even the mere presence of a Khopesh on a military leader's belt inspired respect among subordinates and fear among enemies. In close combat, where the fate of the battle was decided, the Khopesh gave Egyptian warriors an undeniable tactical advantage over enemies with straight swords. The heavy upper part of the blade created enormous inertia when swung, allowing it to pierce leather armor and split wooden shields. It was a weapon of aggressive attack, designed to quickly suppress resistance and break through enemy formations. The blow was delivered with such force that it was practically impossible to parry it with a conventional weapon without risking breaking one's own blade. The tactics of using the Khopesh were based on suppression and domination, which was entirely consistent with the imperial ideology of Egypt. We would be very interested to hear your opinion. What do you think about such an unusual weapon design? Was it purely practical or a tribute to the fashion of the time? Write about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new analyses of historical artifacts. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the Egyptians made the chariot a perfect weapon? Even though they didn't invent it, chariots originally came to Egypt with the Hyksos invaders, becoming a bitter lesson for the pharaohs, whose infantry could not withstand the mobile troops. But Egyptian engineers did not simply copy the enemy's technology. They completely rethought its design. They turned a heavy and unwieldy cart into a light, fast platform capable of maneuvering on the battlefield with incredible grace. It was a technological leap comparable to the advent of aviation in the early 20th century. The secret of the Egyptian chariot lay in the use of advanced woodworking techniques that were unknown to their neighbors. Craftsmen used elm, ash, and birch, which often had to be imported from distant northern regions. The wood was steamed and bent into the desired shape, allowing the structure to be created without heavy metal joints. This approach ensured incredible lightness. The chariot could be lifted by two people, which was critically important when crossing canals. At the same time, the strength of the structure allowed it to withstand enormous loads when moving over rough terrain. Particular attention was paid to the design of the wheels, which were a true masterpiece of engineering at the time. The Egyptians used spokes, the number of which was strictly calculated for an optimal balance between weight and reliability. The wheel rim consisted of several segments, carefully fitted together and bound with rawhide, which became as hard as steel when dry. The wide wheelbase ensured the platform's stability on sharp turns, preventing it from tipping over. The axles were lubricated with animal fats, which allowed high speeds to be reached without the risk of the hub catching fire from friction. The chariot crew consisted of two people, a driver who controlled the movement and a fighter who shot arrows or threw javelins. The driver was a top-class professional, able to feel the movement of the platform and compensate for the unevenness of the terrain. The fighter was freed from the need to watch the road and could fully concentrate on hitting targets. This combination worked as a single mechanism, providing a continuous barrage of fire on enemy formations. The coordination of the crew's actions was achieved through years of grueling training at special training grounds in the desert. The tactics of using chariots radically changed the pattern of battles in the Middle East. The Egyptians did not use them for frontal ramming attacks, as some other peoples did. Their task was to rapidly close in on the enemy, fire, and quickly retreat to regroup. Chariots circled around enemy infantry, exhausting them and disrupting their formation without engaging in dangerous close combat. Only when the enemy's ranks were completely disrupted could the chariots deliver the decisive blow, pursuing those who fled. But even the fastest chariot is useless without weapons capable of striking the enemy from a distance. In the next chapter, we will look at the device that turned Egyptian chariots into deadly mobile platforms. Guess how long it took to create this incredible weapon? The composite bow was the pinnacle of engineering at the time, a true high-tech product of antiquity that took up to a year of painstaking labor to manufacture. Unlike the simple wooden bow used by most peoples, the Egyptian composite bow was a multi-layered device. It combined the properties of different materials working in unison to accumulate and release tremendous energy. This weapon gave Egyptian archers an overwhelming advantage in range and penetrating power. The bow's construction consisted of a wooden base to which plates of horn and layers of animal tendons were glued. The wood served as a frame. The horn on the inside of the bow worked well under compression, and the tendons on the outside worked well under tension. This combination allowed the bow to withstand tremendous stress when drawn without breaking or losing its elasticity. With the bowstring removed, such a bow bent in the opposite direction, forming an almost complete circle, which indicates enormous hidden tension. When the archer pulled the bowstring, he loaded a powerful spring, ready to straighten at tremendous speed. The secret ingredient in the production of composite bows was a special glue, the recipe for which was kept strictly confidential. It was boiled from fish swim bladders or skins to achieve perfect viscosity and transparency. The layers were glued together in stages, with long breaks for drying under strictly controlled humidity and temperature conditions. Any violation of the technology could lead to the bow delaminating at the most crucial moment of battle. That is why master archers were among the most respected craftsmen in Egyptian society. The power of such a bow was so great that it could pierce bronze armor at a distance of up to 100 meters. The light wooden bows of Egypt's enemies were no match for this power, leaving them defenseless against a hail of arrows. Egyptian archers could start shooting long before the enemy could respond, thinning their ranks with impunity. This created a death zone in front of the Egyptian army's front line, which was incredibly difficult to overcome. Composite bows played a special role in equipping chariot crews. turning them into mobile firing points. These precious items were stored in special cases that protected them from moisture in the scorching desert sun, which could damage. Each chariot was equipped with several bows and a huge supply of arrows so that the battle would not be interrupted for a single minute. Shooting from a moving platform required a special, more compact type of bow that was convenient to use in confined spaces. Training in composite bow shooting began at an early age, as it required not only accuracy, but also enormous physical strength. The tension of such a bow was comparable to lifting a heavy load, and this had to be done hundreds of times during a battle. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of a simple axe? In an era when most armor was made of layers of linen and leather, cutting weapons had to have special properties. The Egyptian battle axe has come a long way in its evolution from stone heads to perfect bronze blades capable of cutting through enemy defenses. One of the most recognizable forms was the so-called epsilon axe, named for its resemblance to the Greek letter. Its wide semicircular blade did not just chop, it created a large area of damage. Unlike the Khopesh, the axe was a more democratic and widespread weapon, available to ordinary infantrymen in the Egyptian army. Its design was simple but reliable. The bronze blade was inserted into a groove in the wooden handle and tightly fastened with rawhide straps. The weak point of this design was always the fastening, so Egyptian craftsmen came up with a system of ears on the blade for a more secure fit. This allowed powerful blows to be delivered without fear of the metal part flying out of the handle. The battle axe was the ideal weapon for fighting an enemy protected by a shield and light armor. The narrow, long, penetrating blade that appeared later acted like a pickaxe, piercing the defense with a pointed blow. Such a blow concentrated all the force of the swing in a tiny area, allowing it to penetrate even bronze elements of armor. This was the response of Egyptian armorers to the improvement of protective equipment among neighboring peoples. The technique of fighting with an axe differed from fencing with a sword or fighting with a spear, requiring close proximity to the enemy. Egyptian infantrymen used a shield to get close to the enemy and then delivered quick, chopping blows from above or from the side. The axe allowed the edge of the enemy's shield to be hooked and pulled aside, exposing the opponent to a blow. In close combat, where there was no room for long spears, the axe became king. Axe handles were made of elastic wood species capable of absorbing the recoil of the blow so as not to injure the fighter's hand. The shape of the handle often had a bend at the bottom to prevent the weapon from slipping out of a sweaty palm. The length of the shaft was chosen to provide optimal leverage without hindering movement in formation. Every element was thought out in detail based on real combat experience. But how could one defend against the same weapon in the hands of the enemy? In the next chapter, we will talk about what stood between the life of an Egyptian soldier and the enemy's blade. The spear was the oldest and most common weapon in the Egyptian army's arsenal, forming the basis of the infantry formation. It allowed the enemy to be kept at a distance, creating an insurmountable barrier of sharp bronze tips. The Egyptian spear consisted of a long wooden shaft and a leaf-shaped metal tip attached to the shaft through a socket. This simple design had been refined over centuries of use, achieving a perfect balance of weight and strength. The shafts were made of strong wood, carefully sanded and impregnated with oils to protect them from drying out. In the dense formation of the phalanx, the spear became a collective weapon, the effectiveness of which depended on the coordinated actions of the entire unit. Egyptian spearmen were trained to move as a single organism, striking in unison and covering themselves with. A wall of spears was capable of stopping even the most furious enemy attack, turning any attempt to break through into suicide. The length of the spear gave the advantage of the first strike, allowing the enemy to be struck before they could use their sword or axe. The spearheads had a stiffening rib running down the center of the blade, which prevented them from bending when struck. The shape of the spearhead was designed to easily penetrate fabric and push apart the rings of chainmail or layers of leather armor. The attachment to the shaft was further reinforced with rivets or wrapping to prevent the tip from remaining in the enemy's body. Master armorers produced thousands of tips, ensuring a constant replenishment of arsenals. A metal counterweight was often attached to the rear end of the spear, which served as a counterbalance and protected the shaft from splitting when striking the ground. If the main tip broke, the counterweight could be used as a spare tip, allowing the warrior to continue fighting. This detail also allowed spears to be stuck into the ground during stops, creating an improvised barrier around the camp. The versatility of the spear made it an indispensable tool in both defense and spear training included practicing thrusts at unprotected parts of the enemy's body, the face, neck, and legs. Soldiers learned to quickly change their grip, switching from long range to short range depending on the situation. Coordination of movements and a sense of distance were the main skills instilled in recruits. Unlike the individual skill of a swordsman, the strength of a spearman lay in the discipline of the formation. What if I showed you an item that was more important than a sword for a soldier's survival? The Egyptian shield was not just passive defense, but an active tool for combat, allowing the creation of impenetrable formations. Unlike the round shields of other peoples, the Egyptian shield had a distinctive shape with a rounded top and a straight bottom. This shape was optimized to protect the body from the neck to the knees, leaving the arms free to wield weapons. The shields were made of several layers of wood covered with specially treated bullhide. The technology for processing leather for shields was a complex and lengthy process aimed at giving the material maximum hardness. The hides were soaked in tanning solutions, stretched and dried in the sun until they became as hard as wood. Such leather could withstand a sliding sword blow or stop an arrow in flight. At the same time, the shield remained relatively light, allowing the warrior to maneuver actively in battle without tiring prematurely. A distinctive feature of many Egyptian shields was the presence of a special viewing window at the top. This allowed the warrior to observe the battlefield and the enemy's actions without sticking his head out from behind cover. This design detail saved the lives of thousands of soldiers, protecting them from enemy archers and slingers. The shield's handle was located in the center, providing excellent balance and the ability to control it with one hand. In formation, the shields were joined together to form a solid wall behind which the spearmen in the front rows took cover. The rear rows could raise their shields above their heads, creating protection from overhead fire, later known as the turtle. This tactic required high discipline and constant training so that the formation would not break apart when moving. The Egyptian wall of shields was a formidable force capable of overwhelming the enemy with its physical. The decoration of the shield often had not only an aesthetic, but also a magical function, designed to ward off evil and protect the owner. The skins were often left with wool, creating a characteristic spotted pattern that could be used to distinguish between. For pharaohs and military leaders, shields were decorated with bronze and gold overlays depicting patron gods. Such a shield was a true work of art. But what if the enemy broke through the wall of spears and shields? In the next chapter, you will learn about the weapon of last resort.
By the might of the gods, this shield holds the strength of Egypt.
In ancient Egypt, the dagger was more than just a backup weapon for close combat. It was an object of pride. While spears and axes were government property, the dagger was often a personal possession that adorned the owner's belt. Egyptian daggers had a leaf-shaped blade with stiffening ribs and a comfortable handle. They were intended for combat at arm's length, when long weapons became useless. Daggers with blades made of meteorite iron were particularly famous and were valued more than gold. In an era when humanity did not yet know how to smelt iron from ore on a large scale, this heavenly metal was a miracle. The most famous example is the dagger of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, which has not rusted in thousands of years due to its high nickel content. Possession of such a weapon equated the owner with the gods, because the metal literally fell from. The handles of daggers were made of wood, bone, or stone, and were often decorated with intricate carvings. The pommel was made wide so that the hand would not slip during a strong stabbing blow. The sheath was attached to the belt or forearm so that the weapon could be drawn instantly. The art of quickly drawing a dagger could save your life if your main weapon was lost or broken. The mace is one of the oldest weapons known to mankind, which in Egypt became a symbol of the supreme power of the pharaoh. Even in the pre-dynastic period, stone mace heads were used to smash the skulls and bones of enemies. With the development of helmets and armor, the mace did not lose its relevance, becoming the ideal weapon against armored targets. The heavy blow of this crushing weapon ignored defenses, transferring the energy of the blow directly into the enemy's body, causing concussions and fractures. Egyptian maces had various shapes of pommels, pear-shaped, disc-shaped, and spherical. They were made of hard stone such as granite, diorite, or limestone, and later bronze. The stone was carefully polished and drilled to fit onto the handle, which required a great deal of labor. The hole was made conical for a more secure fit of the pommel on the shaft during impact. During the Old Kingdom, the mace gradually gave way to the axe as a weapon of mass destruction, but remained an important attribute of the pharaoh. Scenes where the ruler raises the mace above the heads of prisoners are a canonical motif in Egyptian art. It was a ritual weapon of victory with which the pharaoh symbolically destroyed the chaos threatening Egypt. However, more utilitarian versions were used in actual combat. A combined version of the weapon appeared, a mace axe, combining a blade for cutting and a heavy butt for striking. This increased the versatility of the warrior, allowing him to change tactics depending on the situation. The blade worked against lightly armed enemies, while the butt worked against those protected by helmets. Such hybridization was characteristic of the search for the ideal. Artifacts in the form of ceremonial maces found in temples are striking for the delicacy of their stone carving. They prove that even the crudest weapons in Egypt were made to be aesthetically perfect. Beauty and death always went hand in hand in the culture of this civilization. But the power of an army lies not only in its weapons, but also in its ability to capture enemy cities and defend its own. The Egyptian Empire could not have existed without a developed system of fortifications and the ability to storm enemy strongholds. The Egyptians were outstanding builders, and they successfully applied their knowledge in military affairs. The borders of Egypt were protected by a chain of powerful fortresses, known as the Walls of the Ruler, which controlled trade routes and deterred nomadic raids. These structures, with their thick walls, towers, and moats, were impregnable to the armies of the time. When storming enemy cities, the Egyptians used a whole arsenal of engineering tools, from simple ladders to complex siege towers. They knew how to dig tunnels, destroy walls, and build embankments to overcome fortifications from above. The use of a battering ram, protected by a canopy from arrows and stones, allowed them to break down the gates of fortresses. All these actions required precise calculations and the coordination of thousands of people. Military logistics played a special role during sieges. Supplying a huge army with water and food in the desert was a feat in itself. The Egyptians built roads, dug wells, and set up temporary supply bases. The ability to organize a long siege often decided the outcome of a war without a general battle. Cities surrendered when they saw that the Egyptian army had come for the long haul and lacked nothing. The experience of siege warfare enriched civil engineering, and vice versa. The heavy lifting technologies used in the construction of the pyramids were also used in the construction of siege ramparts. Egyptian civilization was united in its pursuit of monumentality and efficiency. But behind all these weapons, fortresses, and chariots stood a force that is often forgotten. Egypt's true secret weapon, which allowed it to create and maintain its empire, was its bureaucracy. The army of scribes was no less important than the army of spearmen and archers. They kept track of resources, planned supplies, calculated taxes, and ensured recruitment. Without clear organization and logistics, even the best weapons would be useless pieces of... Scribe with papyrus and reed pens followed the army, recording every ration issued and every broken arrow. This comprehensive accounting allowed the state to know exactly what it was capable of and to plan campaigns years in advance. Effective resource management enabled Egypt to quickly rebuild its army after losses. The system of state warehouses ensured that soldiers were fed and clothed. The organization of the army was advanced for its time. The division into detachments, companies, and divisions simplified management on the battlefield. A clear hierarchy and chain of command ensured that orders were carried out from the pharaoh to the rank and file. Everyone knew their place and their role in the overall mechanism. This discipline set the Egyptians apart from the tribal militias of the... Medical care for the troops was also excellent. Field doctors knew how to treat wounds, apply splints, and prevent epidemics. Caring for the health of soldiers maintained the army's combat effectiveness and boosted morale. The knowledge of Egyptian medicine was legendary in the ancient world.
Then mix with the honey. We need more bandages over here.
In summary, it can be said that the weapons of ancient Egypt were not just instruments of murder, but a reflection of the high culture and technological development of civilization. The 7 types of weapons we have examined, together with engineering genius and organization, created a machine capable of crushing enemies and conquering peoples. From deadly chariots to the invisible work of scribes, every element of this system was important to the overall success. The Egyptians proved that war is a science that requires intelligence, discipline, and innovation. Which Egyptian invention did you find most impressive and why? Would you like to see a video about the peaceful technologies of Egypt that we still use today? Write your suggestions for future topics in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to continue uncovering the secrets of history with us.